Okay, this is the Affordable Housing Committee meeting of Wednesday, November 13th, meeting in the Old Town Hall Conference Room at 7 o'clock. We do have a quorum. Mr. Chair, let you
That's great. Yes, thank you, Mark. So, hi everyone. We're still waiting for a couple of members. We do have a quorum, so we'll go ahead and get started. First item is the minutes of the October 9 meeting. So, does everyone have a copy of the minutes? I need to approve. Okay.
second.
So there's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, unanimous. Great. Next item, we have a guest, frequent guest. Chris Russo to talk about an item of new business actually, and this is on a proposed text amendment allowing for off-site housing development. So, Chris, welcome.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for having me again. These are the latest copies. I
did hand those out.
Did you hand them out? Oh, okay, sorry. I'll change yours. Okay, I have extras. So, current Chris Russo with Russo Mazzino LLC, offices at 10 South Road, Deerfield. Here on this application, which I know we've discussed a multitude of times now in different forms, so I won't repeat because I'm sure this commission remembers a lot of the discussion about this. It originally was a fee in lieu, and then I came a number of months ago to talk about this version, which is units in lieu of designation of offsite BMR dwelling units. And so I'll just go through the regulation. A lot of it is, we had discussions about it and about the flexibility that the commission might want with an amendment like this. I went to the commission and had the zoning commission and had a pre-app meeting where they were receptive to this amendment as well. And we're looking for some flexibility. That's, I think, when we had last met, there was a lot to talk about that and making sure there was some flexibility there for them, because you don't know what situation would arise. After that, I've also continued discussions with staff to work out some of the logistics, which is what the middle paragraph is about. So I'll get to that. But there was a lot of discussion about how this would practically work. But I'll just start at the beginning. So what it reads is the commission at its sole discretion may allow an applicant to designate below market rate dwelling units off-site in lieu of required below market rate dwelling units on-site. I'm just seeing a little change there. On-site offered for sale only as set forth in section 25.7.9 here or above, which is the 25.7.9 is the, if you're 10 units or more, you need 10% BMR. So again, as we had discussed previously, this is intended for sale units, not for rentals. There was some discussion about that with the commission, and after that discussion, everybody agreed that it really should just be for sale. There's not the same issue with rentals. So for sale is the one that we're really targeting here. Next line is the designation of offsite BMR dwelling units shall only be available in lieu of units intended for sale, which we just talked about. However, the commission shall have the sole discretion to permit the offsite BMR dwelling units to be offered for sale and or for rental. So on the flip side, while this option would be only available for sale developments, the offsite unit could be both for sale and for rental. I understand that the town gets more points for rentals, but the commission also felt that it wanted the flexibility, and I don't mean to be speaking for them, but this is just, my recollection from meeting with them. But it would give them flexibility. Because if for some reason there was a need for rentals, maybe of a particular product that was coming before them, that they could have it open to that as well. And that it was just unnecessary to restrict it for sale and for rental. A lot of times when we do the affordable plans, we leave in there provisions for both anyway. So again, so on the offsite BMR could be for sale or for rental. The offsite BMR dwelling unit shall be of similar or greater size as the onsite dwelling units. This is phrased in such a way to give flexibility, as you know, you're not going to get an equal match. One unit on either side could be short or it could be more in square footage. But they wanted to have it be something similar or greater, just so you weren't able to do something and be drastically smaller than the unit you were asking for in lieu of. You know, so for instance, like if you took 250 Pequot, you know, if it's a 2,500 square foot unit, you couldn't go find a 1,000 square foot unit and try to say that that was comparable. But there's enough flexibility, I think, in that wording that if you were off by 100 square feet or something like that, it wouldn't, you know, it would allow for that flexibility. Following up with that, the commission shall have sole discretion as to the adequacy of the size and location of the offsite BMR dwelling units. I think we talked about this at the last meeting as well, that originally I was trying to be cautious in having kind of strict language as to the location. The commission said, no, that's okay, you can have some flexibility there for us. You know, if something is in Southport, it's okay if the offsite BMR is in, you know, the beach area or Greenville Health Fire. I mean, it can go in different places. To set just a radius restriction might be too restricting on there. But to that regard, it's saying that it's in their sole discretion. So they have the ability to decide if it's appropriate. Next line, an applicant may request to designate offsite BMR units, and such designation may be approved by the commission if and when the commission determines in its sole discretion that there are circumstances where the designation would be desirable and in the public interest and interest of the BMR unit owners. That goes to this discussion that's really gone with this thing for the entire time, whether it was the fee in lieu or the units in lieu, that there might be for sale situations which are disadvantageous to the BMR unit owners. And so, you know, if the commission finds that it is, then maybe offsite units are more appropriate. And so they would select it in you know, and that would be the reason why they would permit the units in lieu. The next paragraph, you know, because there was some concern about how this would practically work, in the sense that if an offsite unit did become available, that because of the way the market is, you have to move quickly. Because you will be competing against other, you know, buyers who, you know, in the market. And these days, I mean, I know just from our practice, a lot of sales are moving very quickly, and a lot of people are waiving contingencies and jumping on deals right away because there's just not that much inventory. And so, if you had to find the unit, the offsite unit, and it was just being conveyed to the town, it would have a very lengthy process to go to. My understanding from talking to the zoning was it'd have to go to Board of Finance and has to get approved by the town.
I just went through it, 60 days.
60 days? All right, well, you did it quicker. So
I do it all the time quicker.
No, I mean, so
There may be situations where it might be helpful to convey it either to the town or some like-minded entity, whether it's the housing authority or another not.
right, well, and that's.
I think this provides flexibility.
And that provides for it. I mean, there could also be the town might not want it, right? You know, might not want to handle it. So What this says is that the commission may also approve for the offsite BMR units to be conveyed to the town of Fairfield or some third-party entity, i.e. the Fairfield Housing Authority or a nonprofit housing provider. I know Operation Hope has a couple, right? And then Habitat for Humanity, for their administration or potential ownership of the BMR unit. In said scenario, there's an error here. It should say the town of Fairfield, the town-related entity or third-party entity would have an option to further restrict the affordability requirements of the off-site BMR dwelling unit. I restrict the unit to persons whose income is less than or equal to 60% rather than the 80%.
If you're conveying it, well, you have to put that information in there. Couldn't they just do that once they own it?
They could. They could. I guess if the commission wanted, one of the benefits we saw of this regulation is the no, it's a good question. The regs only require 80% AMI. So if this did go to Fairfield Housing Authority, or if it did go to Habitat for Humanity, they could decide to reduce it to 60. They could decide to reduce it to 40% AMI.
Even a condition that the commission would accept it.
Would accept, yeah. I mean, that might be a situation where the commission would be even more in favor of the offsite unit. It obviously yields more points, but it also, provides more housing at maybe a different level than you have. Maybe you have plenty of 80% AMI, but you don't have enough 60, you don't have enough 40%. And so again, the thought would be.
Excuse me, Chris, I got a question.
Yeah, sure.
How do you finesse the timing? If a developer comes in and requests to do an offsite, and as you'd mentioned, you might have located a couple of units, but you have to move really quickly because somebody else is going to grab them. But you have to wait for TPZ to approve, and they probably aren't going to approve unless they can see the units. So and that was a lot of the discussion that happened. I think with the way this reg is worded, with the way that we would envision it is, if you were, let's say you had 250 Pequot Ave, and it's a unit and it's 2,500 square feet and it's 2-bedroom. You want to move into trying to find an offsite unit. You can then have a conversation with Habitat or with the Fairfield Housing Authority and say, look, I'm looking for a 2-bedroom around 2,500 square feet. Would you have interest in ownership of that or in maintaining it or something, operating it? And then Habitat says yes, maybe they say no, and then you go to Operation Hope, but you kind of have the logistics of that planned out. And then let's say my house, 533 Merwin's Lane, comes on the market, and that's where you want to put the units. You make the offer, but you would have a contingency on it that you would go to P&Z, but you already have the deal worked out with maybe Habitat, the Housing Authority, and say, we've already talked to the Housing Authority, they'll take it, it's this place, and it's a quicker process for P&Z to say yes. And, because P&Z does want to be able to look at the unit. They're not gonna say
Any unit.
any 2-bedroom, 2,500 square feet. They're gonna wanna see it, but hopefully this middle paragraph shortens that time frame.
Yeah, so I still see a problem because like if you find a unit and you want to put contingency language in your offer, and the seller is going to say, well, wait a minute, I can get 110% of what I'm asking for from somebody else.
Right.
No,
That'll work. That's not really our issue.
Yeah, that's the
Provides
tool
a tool.
developer, right.
Yeah.
But you're right. I think that's the issue,
Yeah.
whether you can get the time. And then I don't know if there's enough specificity here. I understand the need to provide flexibility.
Right.
But you want to provide a list of criteria by which the commission then evaluates whether this is comparable or in the public interest, right? You want to give here's a list of things that you want to consider. And if you write it too open-ended, you kind of are shooting in the dark. Like maybe this will satisfy them. And then you go to the commission and it's like, nah, we don't really think that works. And you got to go around and look for something else. And nah, I don't really think that works. So it's, I think that's the challenge, which you almost have to have some understanding up front as to what the commission would consider comparable, right? before you even waste
Is the
people's time.
commission gonna turn to Mark Barnhart and say,
Well, I like to think that they would not turn to me necessarily, but also ask this board for its.
I mean, they don't wanna do it, I don't think. The
I mean,
commission-
in that scenario, I'd rather see, rather than one 2,500 square foot, 2-bedroom unit, I'd rather see like 2 or 3, 1,000 unit apartments that we could, that would be meaningful, right?
Yes.
To take one very large unit and convert it into 3 more modestly sized units that you can help 3 families out with or 3 households out with. So, but that's all up to the discretion of the commission. Who knows at this point what they would think? Do they think that's a good deal? If it was in the beach area versus Southport, or whether, we had a case where it was a 4-for-1 swap, Southport to Tungus Hill they decided that wasn't a good deal. So I think it would provide a tool, and I understand why we're trying to provide flexibility, so it's not to give them a lot of discretion, but at the same time, it puts a lot of onus on the developer, the applicant, to figure this out.
Well, and just procedurally, I guess, you were there when I met. The first version was more restrictive.
And we pushed you for
And they said, come back to us, cast the net wider,
and we
and then they can hone it down. Whereas if I come with an amendment application and it's really drilled down, then they wouldn't feel comfortable then starting to kind of break it apart essentially. So the sense I got from them was they wanted me to have something that was broader, and then when it comes to them deciding on the application, they might drill it.
I think that was an accurate reflection of what the conversation.
So
Chris, suppose they do want to do as Mark suggested, find a way to take care of 2 families or 3 families instead of, 1-for-1 or, comparable size. Does this inhibit that in any way?
I think if there's some language that would look like it would inhibit it, it'd be the part where it says that they shall be of similar or greater size
Right.
as the on-site dwelling units. And that might be, and then I guess the next line too is the actually that is more open-ended, the adequacy of the size and location.
Yeah, almost.
But the similar or greater size would probably be the one that would restrict from doing something like that. We did have a discussion about that. I think they were just a bit concerned if that was way too open-ended. That because the permutations you could do on that were, that you could take a 2-bedroom and then split it into a couple of studios and stuff like that. I don't know. I got the sense, if I'm remembering, that they thought that was too open-ended. But they would have, they could cut that line. I mean, they could take that line.
This is a work in progress.
Right.
It certainly makes further changes to it if it gets that. So.
Yeah. So that would be the question, is if they wanted to provide themselves that flexibility, I think you would have to remove that line around about the size. Otherwise, to me, it seems to be, again, it's a wide net.
So the way you're envisioning it is, you would have to, provide something in trade, offer that to the commission. And they would say yes or no. And if they say, yeah, we like that, then you consummate, you put under contract, and then you'd be in a position to convey that to the town or some other entity prior to the CFO being issued. So there is this, we talked about a little bit of the timing too, because from my standpoint, it could be advantageous if you got the benefit of those units sooner. If in the town ends up owning it, you got that in perpetuity, not for a 40-year term either.
Yeah.
So, and you could also, as Chris said, go and amend or deeply target the income threshold. So you're then providing greater affordability to lower income groups. So there's there are some benefits, clearly some advantages to that. And those are the three things I can see there in terms of the town having it in perpetuity, being able to provide greater affordability and perhaps getting the benefit of the unit sooner.
The in perpetuity, why couldn't that apply to whomever owns the offsite units?
Could. It could be that would be a condition. I mean, I would say, you know, if it was the town or the housing authority or some other entity like that, they would be similarly.
Or if it stays was a developer.
Well-
Because they're allowing the developer to go off-site, and so they could put the restriction that it's in perpetuity.
You could, I suppose.
And Commissioner, one comment you made that I didn't address too, about, you know, going out in the market. The developer may have to pay 110% of it, and that's gonna be their cost in it, is that to be able to compete, they're going to have to put it up 110%. But I think what this language, particularly in the middle paragraph, allows is a due diligence period can be reasonable. Though it sounds like Mark does it quickly anyway, but you know, you could do 30 days or something like that, you know. Like, you know, normal title and municipal contingency is 14 to 21 days. So you might be able to get before.
One of the groups that it would have to accept is the Town Planning and Zoning Commission, so under 824. So I suppose you could do double duty. If you had to present this in trade, you could satisfy the 824 review at the same time. Yeah, I think it's an interesting proposal. I do think, yeah, you would have to provide something if you're competing in a hot market, and you're gonna probably have to overpay to get that contingency. But clearly, you know, it would still have to be advantageous to the developer to even go that route. You know, so he's still gonna be able to justify it on his bottom line, because it would be a savings over otherwise providing that unit on site. So, if it works out for both parties, there's no harm.
So are you proposing that the commission be able to dictate to the developer that instead of giving us one unit of 2,500 square feet, you give us 3 units of 750?
If I were the town and my interest is trying to create as much affordable housing as possible, whether it's to get more moratorium points or just provide more housing opportunities, yeah, I would love the 3-for-1 swap, you know, for maybe you're buying the same type of unit, but you're splitting it up, kind of the conversation we had last night with Royal Avenue, where it's like the box is the same, we're just splitting it into 5, you know, parts in this way where the box is the same. Maybe it's 2,500 square feet in total, but we're splitting it up into 3 parts. So you're satisfying 3 families. I don't know. I'm just saying I could see that as being beneficial to the town. The town would say, yeah, maybe that would be a good swap. I just don't, you know, there's a lot of unknowns, and I think, you know,
Right, you don't know what the market's gonna give you. The market could give you a 3-family with 700 square feet each unit, or it could give you, you know, a single unit of 2,500. You don't really know.
I don't know that it's necessarily our concern, in that it provides a tool, and the risk is on the developer, the applicant, to figure this out. And I would think that's, you know, until we have a little bit of history, it might be hard to figure it out initially as to what the commission is thinking, unless they provide some guidance up front.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you know, you would certainly make it your point to understand what they're looking for. So, you know, I would think that you in your capacity would be.
I think what would happen if this amendment passed is, you know, again, taking the 250 Pequot, that developer would talk to Fairfield Housing Authority right after, would talk to maybe Habitat, would talk to the town and say, okay, if I find this, what do you want to do? Do you want it? Do you want, you know, and would have a lot, you know, just start embarking on those conversations. And then, you know, set the realtor or whoever out there to try to find it.
If this passes, we might convene a meeting with all the parties and just have a conversation, see what's out there. So
Right.
just facilitate a conversation up front.
Right, and probably, I mean, because I know, because he's already, partially doing it, is probably coming in with several ideas, look at several properties and presenting those. So that's basically it, and,
Yeah, you're okay. I know, I was there and I know the commission said, yeah, it's easier for us to tighten the screws, to shrink it down than to go the other way. Because then we'd have to notice something.
right, yeah, they would just.
So, give us something that's fairly broadly written and then we're gonna wordsmith it further. So, that does make sense. I think the concerns that we had when we talked about the planning district and location, well, what if you're across the street, that's locationally proximate, but it's technically not within the same planning district, so I think location is a key consideration, clearly was in part of their thinking too. They didn't want, one end of the town to the other end of the town.
Right.
There's some gray area in between.
Or to start with Southport for that matter.
Right. Well, I think we're talking about Southport, but yeah, I know, yeah.
So that's it. So the intent is, to move forward to B and Z, obviously, gathering your comments and.
Any other questions of Chris or?
Yeah, well, I'll just say, this is good, My problem with the effort in general is that there's not the economics don't match up. As we saw in the Westway development, there were two, but the free market units were going for $1,250,000 or something like that. And below market was like 300,000. And so the developers saw that there was like $1 million difference. And so there might be, and I would say this to the commission, that instead of a 1-for-1 trade, we should get more out of it because you're letting the developer recoup $1 million. So instead of giving us 1 unit of similar size, you give us 2, or maybe you give us 3, so that the economics are more balanced.
I think giving them the flexibility, the discretion is probably a good thing. As broad as you can for them.
Right, and so, yeah, because each one is gonna be different, and that's why, I think they laughed at me about the number of times I put sole discretion in there. Because I just kept trying to drive that point home, because there may be a development where the developer can't just transfer the unit. They still have to hold on to the unit, but it'll be off-site and they'll drop it down to 60 or they'll drop it down to 40, and that works with their economics. There may be another deal, maybe in Southport, where that affords for you to not only drop it down to 40, but also to just transfer for free the lot to the Fairfield Housing Authority or Habitat, and do something like that where then, like for instance, if it was the town could then convey it, and then the town would make money on the conveyance as well. I mean, so that maybe that one had, to put it kind of simply, that one would have more perks than the other one where just economics wise did not work out. So I feel like this amendment and the multiple repetitions of sole discretion, just make it clear that like you can use this amendment for both those scenarios. Because again, it is casting a wide net. There's a lot of different, I think, permutations of this that could come up.
I think the benefit of this versus the fee in lieu is that you have the actual units in hand versus a second step. If you get the money, then you have to go find the unit. That can take some time. So that was always a concern that the commission had relative to, it's great to have the money sitting in the housing trust fund, but it doesn't actually produce the unit until you actually deploy it. So, and whether the money that was being offered in lieu was enough to actually produce a unit someplace else. Here, you actually have a physical, tangible unit.
And I have a feeling too, if approved, I feel like it's gonna be a working amendment. You know, I could see as experience comes on, it's gonna get tweaked. I mentioned to them the Stanford model, where Stanford actually allows for not only the units, but the fee as well. And so, so for instance, if you were in Stanford, if you required, if you took like the 10%, let's say it was 26 units, you took the 10% and it's, so that would come out to 2.6. Stanford, they allow you to give them 2 units and then convert the 0.6 into money. So then you get money as well. And I think the commission was intrigued by that. I know the chairman said, oh, well, that's an interesting idea. But I think, you know, again, that's one of those things, start with this maybe, and then see what you can do down the line and work on it.
It's also the economics question.
A lot of different ways to skin the cat.
Right.
I think you have to have both options. I think you have to, because it just affords you speed and, you know, I mean, sitting from our perspective, getting the units versus the cash, and it gives flexibility to developers. They can make a call and say, no, we don't want to. So, I mean, I think it, you know, that's what Ridgefield does too, right? They have both, right?
A lot of places, if they provide a buyout option, it's both ways. You can do both ways. In this case, you know, again, I think the preference of not just this board, but I think planning and zoning is to create a on-site, to recognize that there might be limitations with the other units that may not always be in the town's best interest, or in the interest of the people who would actually live there, in which case they want to provide a different option. So from our perspective, it's another tool in the toolkit, but until it's actually been used, there is a lot of discretion which can be used for good as well as, you know, not so good. But I think, you know, it's another tool, essentially. Any other questions for Chris? Or we can let him go home?
I did want to say thank you. You spent a lot of time on this, a lot of creativity, and I appreciate you doing that.
Hey, no, I appreciate all the feedback and everything, and, you know, I think we hope we're getting this close to a good place, and then, you know, anxious to see it go into effect. Hopefully it ends up producing a lot of units.
Or at least a few.
Just a few. So, all right, thanks everyone. Have a good rest of the meeting.
Okay, so we'll go back to the agenda, the order of the agenda. So the next item is update on the affordable housing plan. So, Mark, do you have anything on your studies that you wanted to?
You know, I think we've been talking a lot about the inclusionary zoning provisions and possible changes to it. And I think the consensus was we wanted to see, the concept is included in the draft POCD. Wanted to see how, we prefer that the POCD be adopted first before then we proceed to the next step. And I do think it would be beneficial to have a joint meeting with this board and the Planning and Zoning Commission before we provide a formal text amendment change. And they're maxed out right now in terms of meetings. They're meeting virtually every week to deal with a rush of new applications, plus try to complete the work on the POCD. My understanding is that the Planning Commission will meet on the 19th of this month in a planning session in their capacity to evaluate the comments that they received at the public hearing on the draft POCD, and hopefully then plot a course forward to adoption. Don't expect them to adopt it that night. It's more of a, hey, what did we hear? Do we want to make any changes to the draft? And then what's the step? What are the next steps leading to adoption? So that's certainly good news. It looks, I would guess then we would be looking at the new year in terms of making a proposal on these things. I don't know that You know, we're far away from that, you know, I think the issue that we've certainly talked to a lot of our neighboring Fairfield County towns, neighbors to see what they've been doing, just so we have that information at our disposal. I think the bigger question oftentimes is, you know, by making this change, we want to make sure that projects still are economically viable, that we're not setting the bar too high such that projects that might otherwise go forward now cannot because, you know, the economics don't work in this current environment. I don't know that we're there yet, and I don't know if we necessarily will see that until we actually put forth proposals. So that's kind of where we're at with that. The other pieces, you know, we've talked about the parking regulations. I've actually had several conversations with property owners, one recently. You know, I've shared the analysis that Bob put together. I would say there's definitely interest doing, you know, one particular case, they're looking at a mixed-use development that would include residential. Because we would free up some land that is currently lying fallow under asphalt, not being used. So so there's a couple things, the parking, I think, and all these are in the draft.
They're in the
TFC.
draft. I mean, the inclusionary, it says to go from 10 to 12 or more, right?
I-
Higher. So,
I suppose the alternative would be, as is being done by 2179, 2199 Post Road, Mark Andre's project is
yeah,
put forth an application that discusses, hey, here's how our proposal mirrors the language in your draft P O C D.
Yeah.
And here are some text amendments that go with it. You know, we could do that. You know,
So it's interesting though, that, because they committed to 20%. And at the, I guess the pre-hearing last night for the Circle Hotel, they're proposing 12 and not 10. So it's interesting
Not
that,
15.
and that, well, I think it should be at least 15. And I think
So
maybe a few others thought it should be higher
yeah, so
as well. But it's just a pre-application hearing, non-binding.
the TOD overlay has been bumped up to 12. So I think, you know, when you're looking at, that's why I think
Yeah.
441, even though it's not necessarily a TOD overlay, they're thinking like it's comparable density. So they
Probably.
certainly, that's lifted the bar.
Yeah.
But they're, to your point, if that's what they're proposing,
Yeah, that's their start.
and you also have evidence, and I've talked to, you know, Mark Andre a few times. You know, this works for you at 20%? You know, I think if he's able to make that work at 20%, that, you know,
Yeah.
suggests that, you know, maybe maybe that's not an unreasonable ask.
Yeah. Well, we're certainly 15.
That's the place next to the cigar store.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
It includes this.
long story, we're not queued up to do anything tonight. You know, I don't, at this point, we're probably looking at, you know, maybe January when they adopt it.
Well, I think certainly a joint meeting, if not with the commission, at least with commission staff. Before.
Yeah, I thought about this because, you know, we've got people that are taking advantage of the informal pre-application to have a conversation with the commission.
Really?
I mean, it's almost like, what are we missing here? Why don't we do this too?
What do we chop over?
We've been waiting our turn patiently. So, I mean, I guess there are some options if we wanted, if we felt like we wanted a little bit quicker, there's a couple different ways we can.
I'm sure the staff has already begun making, changes. At the same time that they're still trying to get the POCD through this process. Yeah.
We still have the consultant for what, the rest of next year?
I don't know how long their tenure.
But the consultant has done some work or.
Yeah, they're
Well.
engaged to do the update of the zoning regulations. So, you know, they're doing that at least. Yeah.
And on the
You
15th,
mentioned the parking. I thought it was interesting. The last zoning board of appeals granted the owner of there's 3 parcels on Black Rock Turnpike, includes the Starbucks, includes the Old Navy, and then the one next to it. They got relief, and they're allowed to have fewer parking spaces because they want to put in a golf simulator and something under the vitamin shop there. So they just got relief. No problem. Yeah, we'll let you go with fewer parking spaces.
which ones were they, Bob?
Hmm?
Which ones?
So, which one?
Yeah, which ones again?
This is is it Turnpike or is it the one
Yeah,
next?
Black Rock Turnpike. Yeah.
Turnpike Shopping Center.
Turnpike Shopping's got the AT&T building, it's 3 different parking lots, but it's one owner.
That's Cleveland,
Yeah, they're putting an athletic center in under the vitamin shop, and they wanted relief. from
That's
the
fairly
parking.
full, that parking lot.
It is pretty full. Well, no, it's actually about 60%.
really?
That's one of them that I looked at.
Because no one goes-
No one actually parks.
actually goes
No
down.
one, yeah, it's underneath parking, and they want to take some of that for the golf simulators. That's true.
But that, to your point, that's probably the least egregious
Right,
example.
right.
of the ones we studied.
Where's the asphalt with the Circle Diner? Behind it? Is that where they're?
What's that?
Where's the extra parking at the Circle Diner?
It's not at the diner, it's at the.
The hotel?
Yeah.
Back behind it? Is that where you're talking about? They're planning to build something? Behind the hotel?
No, they're gonna replace it with
But
a
they-
hotel. and-
Yeah,
Oh, replace part of the hotel.
The whole thing, they'll take it all down and.
Yeah, the proposal is
Big
to
proposal.
actually scrape the site
Yeah.
and
Oh, yeah.
build a new hotel and a new residential development next to it,
53
which actually is built into, the grade.
Yeah.
So they're using the grade to create
The below.
some of the below grade parking and to
Mhm.
hide the overall height of the development. So it works
It's pretty
well with the
appealing.
site. It's very attractive looking design.
Yeah.
And actually, since you mentioned it, I did talk to the owner and his team and extended on your behalf an opportunity to come in and present to the Affordable Housing Committee, and they said they would be delighted to do that. And asked if we would want them to come in December. So I said, well, let me check, and I think if you're amenable to that, I will have them come in and make a brief presentation.
And
as
I
to what
think it's
they
the
have in
same developer as the Anchorage. It was one of their properties.
mind. It is actually, it's Spinnaker.
It's Spinnaker, yeah.
So it's not directly the same folks, but they've been active in town and in the area.
Yeah.
So, anyway,
So I think we're probably good with that, right? For December meeting?
I will formally extend that invitation.
Great. So back to the P O C D for a minute. So, as you said, Mark, the 19th, which is next
This week.
Tuesday.
Yeah.
I guess the focus of that meeting will be discussion of the feedback that they've gotten from P O C D. We had a public hearing on the 15th that Jackie and I were.
Yeah, you guys were there.
Was
so
there.
You didn't hear anything.
The video is still not available,
Is that right?
still not up.
Wow.
Well, I mean, there was a preponderance there were a preponderance of speakers focused on Mark Andre's development. And, neighbors.
Well organized.
Yeah, exactly.
4 or 5, I guess. Yeah.
Talking about all kinds of issues related to that.
Blocking the sun was seemed to be the biggest one.
I like the one out of character. Because it's like, well,
There's a lot of character. There was the,
block building.
there were the pollinators.
Yeah, that was sort of a surprise. Like the last 45 minutes of the meeting was all about gardening. So
Yeah.
a lot of time spent on conservation of green
There's
space.
education there.
Oh, there's plan of conservation and development, so, yeah.
There were some comments of the one, because I live down on the beach, one of my neighbors was talking about how there are so many ADUs at the beach that aren't really classified as ADUs, and so they're overpopulating those ADUs. So she was making a point that there should be some control of that, where you have 2 properties on two buildings on one property. She was referring to them as ADUs and they're not being operated as ADUs.
Okay.
So that was kind of an interesting look on it, I thought.
there weren't not that many holistic
Mhm.
presentations.
Aside from yours.
I gave mine, I put copies in case anybody wanted to see it.
Company excluded, of course.
This is- But I mean, Alyssa Kent is the architect, it's the kind of impromptu, off the cuff manner, you know, advancing our objectives. The opening remarks by Realtor Ken Camaro, who's a kind of an interesting character, but I think those were really constructive from the perspective of Emmeline and Jim in terms of making the case for the need for affordable housing, you know, for various demographics in town. And he was the opening speaker and he spoke at some length. So,
But I think other than the Mark Andre group, there was very little conversation about affordable housing. There was a few comments about the look. You know, people got up and said about the look of the buildings that are going in, but I didn't find a lot of comments about it.
there really weren't. And so I'm just wondering if it would be a good idea for any of us who wanted to comment individually between now and next Tuesday to go ahead and write to the, you know, to the commission and offer their thoughts, since there hasn't been a lot of feedback that's been provided so far.
And what do you attribute that to?
Or that we know of, Bob. So there may have been a number of people that have written.
I don't think so.
Probably not.
I don't, you know, this has been wrong for a long time. Yeah.
Really?
So I
Couple more
don't,
years, so that's.
Yeah.
I do think the people have, maybe some people have moved on and focused on other things. People just not aren't paying attention to it, because they don't perceive it to affect them directly.
Until it does, and then that moved them to come,
Yeah,
Mark Andre people.
right, so they, you know, because Mark is
More
tying
time.
his project into the draft P O C D goals, so they saw that as an opportunity to, they don't like that direction necessarily because of what it would mean for their particular street or neighborhood. But I think, you know, we've been at this for four plus years. I think it's probably time to, I mean, and honestly, there was much conversation about a future disposition of the former Exide property in 2190 Post Road. And I think that's a perfect example of why you need a master plan, because it's one thing to say, but our draft says this is our goal and that's what we'd like, but until you actually adopt it and enact regulations or a zone change to implement it, I mean, who's to say that, you know, the car dealership is a perfectly acceptable or permitted use within that zone? So I think that was the challenge that they faced with that particular application. So I think the longer this goes on, I could envision other scenarios where this might also pop up, and that's not what we want.
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
until you land the plane, I think you have that issue.
Why wasn't there more interest in that property for housing? Because of the.
I think it's you know, I really think it's an easy, you have to understand the motivations of the ownership group there, okay?
Oh,
And I think that's, you know, I know them, I work with them a lot, and I think I understand what they're trying to accomplish there. You know, from their standpoint, it's a straight ground lease with a, you know, very high credit worthy organization. It's going to provide a guaranteed income stream for the next, you know, 20, 50 years. So that's what they're looking for, as opposed to something that might be more, you know, risky. Again, until you have when they propose something as a concept review, but the Planning and Zoning Commission, you know, said, well, we like elements of it, we don't like this part of it, and you know, it's a complicated process. So I can understand why they would want to ink something that's, you know, I'm just cashing a check. I don't have to worry about contingencies or anything else. my check's gonna bounce. It's, you know, this is good stuff. So anyway, I think, to your point earlier, at this point, I think we can probably wait till the POCD, hopefully, I guess we'll get a good read next Tuesday.
Yeah.
And then we can act
Sure.
accordingly in
Let's see
December.
what happens.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll move on to the next item then, which is the, I guess we're moving on to old business,
Yeah.
so.
Well, we will expect to notice our application next week. All things hold true. We're expecting a final inspection of the property on Park Avenue this week. Assuming that goes well, we would anticipate that a CO will be issued next week, which would allow us to notice our application. And then the clock starts running. So we have to provide, I think, a 20-day notice upfront of our intent to apply.
90 day, you said?
And then, yeah, it's like, I think it's 20 days upfront when you notice that you're gonna apply, and then you apply, and then they notice again that they've received it. And they're accepting further public comments, but then they have 90 days in which to move. So in the meantime, until they approve the application, we will still see set aside applications, and you can anticipate seeing more of them in the next 3 months. Because everyone
Why
is on notice and is acting accordingly. So that's why we're, Planning and Zoning Commission is now meeting weekly, it seems. So the two, they did approve Tuesday night, 222 Stilson Road. It was unanimous. There was some gnashing of teeth.
Had you left before then, or?
No, I stayed for that. I stayed for through the recess before they got to the. So, yeah, they approved it unanimously. And in fact, I think majority of the commissioners indicated that they would support it regardless. They thought it was appropriate, reasonably sized. They noted that it could have been bigger. They were, and thought it was a good project, good location, transitory location, transitional between commercial district and a residential district. And really didn't have any issues with it. Certainly acknowledged there was nothing in the record to substantiate a public health safety issue that would outweigh the need for affordable housing.
I thought they went to court though, for wetlands.
The individual,
Yeah.
a neighbor has filed an appeal on the inland wetlands approval. And, you know, would anticipate that somebody might take an appeal on this one too. But I was surprised it got 7-0. They also approved the amendment under the H here, the proposed density bonus that was approved. 7-0. Again, many comments, favorable comments. A few concerns expressed and some effort to try to impose some additional requirements to come back and, you know, do site application, public hearing, notice and the like. It was noted that why would that be advantageous for somebody to go through that process? Regulate things that aren't currently in our regulations, but it was approved. We do have coming up, in addition to Mr. Andre's project on 2179, they started the public hearing Tuesday night. Didn't conclude it obviously before they reached curfew, and that looks like it's on the agenda for December. Will not be probably the 3rd, but probably the second meeting in December.
Oh,
The
second.
10th. I believe the 10th. So, as they're meeting like weekly.
Yeah.
The 3rd will likely be another set aside application at 467 Tungus Hill, which is, I think, a 46 unit development being proposed for that site.
There's a single family house there now?
There are a couple.
There's two properties.
It's 467 or 460?
467.
467.
I was looking-
460, you couldn't find it.
I couldn't find it.
It's,
And it's 40-some.
On that email you sent with the little list.
46 units, Bob?
46 units, yeah. Yeah.
So that's near the car wash?
It's right across the street and
Okay.
it cuts through to Soundview, so it's the whole property.
Oh, okay.
We would also,
It's interesting.
you know, they didn't go through code review. Just went straight
Right.
to application. Not the most, the design probably could use some improvements. Again, some components of the site or the project in terms of its connectivity, walkability, they probably could use some improvements too, but through the hearing process.
When do you think that'll be?
The third,
That'll be the third?
they're on our clock, so once they file, they have 65 days, I
okay.
think, right? So.
Okay.
So I think, and from what I understand, they don't think that the applicant would provide a time extension,
No.
so they're gonna put it on.
What about the property across the street that's all fenced in? It looks like it maybe was an old gas station maybe, or
Yeah, it is a gas station.
that's just, is that for sale or is that what's
It
that?
was purchased.
Oh.
We had actually tried to swing a deal with Operation Hope in conjunction with, yeah, you know it.
That's my daughter owned that property.
Uh,
Former service station.
we-
It's now going to revert back to a service. station.
Correct.
It was sold.
Yeah, we tried
Earlier this year.
to work a deal with Operation Hope to purchase it in conjunction with the town
Yeah.
property, where the garage sits to
Right.
provide
It would have been
additional
perfect.
parking.
Ideal.
For a lot of different reasons, it didn't happen. And so somebody else came in and
Yeah.
purchased it using it for a service station. We do have a couple other potential applications floating around. There's the one up on Upper Black Rock Turnpike, Al Camerata's property, which is kicked around for a number of years.
The one on Pensy?
No, on Black,
Oh,
above the Hi-Ho.
Yeah. That's been taken
On,
around.
up on the right-hand side.
It's on the other side of the street.
On the other side of the street. So that proposal's still kicking
That's not
around.
wetlands?
There is wetlands up
There
there,
is,
yeah. It's a tough site too. And then there's a proposal, like 40 units off of Reef Road. One of those back lots where they aggregated a bunch of parcels. It also went
Private
through.
park?
It's on the other side of the street.
Other side. Oh, other side.
Yeah. The dump side.
Back by that, whatever the office thing is back there by the senior center?
It's not, it's actually, there's some rear lots is off of Forest Reef, somewhere in that right. So there's like 3 or 4 lots
Wow.
tied together. So there's a couple that are gonna be coming out at some point too. But there's nothing really we can do. We have to just get saw through this, I think.
How many units for the one above the high note and across the street?
I think that's like 150.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I don't know that's ever been fully designed. I think that was for purposes of getting the water pollution control approval. It was listed as, not to exceed 150 units, so that's just sewer capacity. But-
So it's across from Hio and further.
No, it's on the same side of the street as Hi-Ho. It's just up.
Second across from the street.
Oh, that's the challenging lot, isn't
It's
it?
very
Oh,
challenging.
very.
Yeah,
I don't see it.
very challenging. And, while we're talking about it, St. Emery's School, Bureau Street, I checked in with the priest there, as well as the diocese. And it's I don't know if it's under contract, but it will be under contract. Somebody wants to spend a lot of money to buy it, which is what the church is after, a lot of money. And I would anticipate either an 830G or some type of, larger multifamily housing development there as well.
What about St. Michael's? That's over there by the maintenance.
Yeah, we talked to the Episcopal Church about St. Michael's, and our hope was that we might be able to acquire that to provide a temporary home for Operation Hope as they build a new facility on the town property and then use that for parking. But we haven't been able to reach a deal, so.
Is it out of business or is it still?
There is, it's not an Episcopal church right now. They own the property, but they lease it to, I think, a Greek Orthodox maybe, that's using it temporarily, but it's like month to month.
Okay.
The Episcopal Diocese has a committee because
Well, they have.
there are 50, yeah, but I mean, there are 50 properties that they're trying to make an overall policy about how to how.
Well, there's 3 properties in Fairfield that are access to their current requirements right now, which we've been in conversations with them on. St. Michael's is the smallest.
What happens to Mill Hill Terrace or Mill Hill?
Noel Terrace is
Yeah.
the Episcopal church, yeah, and they also have St. Tim's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're not keeping that open?
Well, they're open to, right now they merge parishes, so the idea is to, have 2 campuses, but they're open to other
They're open to
uses that
others.
would
Is that
complementary.
AAA?
So it is,
Yeah.
it's really, it's a tough zone,
That's a
yeah,
tough zone.
so, I made some suggestions, as to something that might be complementary, but the zoning's a little tricky. I don't see that as a really great housing site, unless you're tearing down, building, single family homes up there. So. Which doesn't really serve our long-term purpose. So that covers pretty much, most of the stuff. I think the only other thing, I did want to provide a copy of the letter that we provided based on the Affordable Housing Committee's endorsement of the project at 2179 Post Road. A long time ago. Finally got around to helping.
Yeah, we just got the letter out. Even though the committee approved it in June.
That's okay. They just.
Kind of fell off the radar for a little bit. I did want to provide a quick update on Greenfield and Parkview. I did also send out, I brought 1 copy, the latest enrollment data from the Board of Ed.
Yeah.
Which we superimpose over housing developments of 10 or more units. So the Board of Ed provides addresses for kids that are enrolled in the school system, and then we check that against our addresses of multifamily development to calculate what the number of kids per unit is. And it's actually going down over the years. It was 0.15, it's now 0.12. Last year was 0.13. So it's going down each year. So,
Does that get published somewhere or mentioned publicly? Because the residents ought to know, to quiet the.
I know that the Planning and Zoning Commission receives it, and they no longer even debate the issue.
I remember Jim brought it up.
Earlier in the meeting.
They provide this information each year to the Planning and Zoning Commission, and now it's basically accepted as fact.
Yeah.
We don't get a lot of pushback on this.
Right.
I don't know that, we talked about how to convey this information to the broader public, and I'm just not sure that people hear this until it really is impacting them in some fashion. And then even then, I don't know that there's some broader issue at play that I'm not sure they'd be receptive to the message, but certainly the decision makers understand the data and have accepted that. That's good data. So Parkview, let me just give you an idea. So Parkview, we acquired 376 Quincy through foreclosure. we did have the owner who had been foreclosed was living there. And he's of very low income, and which is reason why he wasn't able to pay his mortgage. And so we did meet with him a couple times to go through the numbers and see if we could find a suitable place for him to live. He doesn't need to live in a 3-bedroom house. It's just him. He had an elderly mother who's now in a rehab convalescent facility in town. So he does want to live locally with his mom being nearby. And so we did work out an arrangement with the folks at 5545 to provide a studio apartment for him. And as part of the discussion we had with the Board of Selectmen, we asked if, because we had reserved, I think this board had reserved $350,000 for the acquisition of it. It only cost $273 to buy the unit. But we had set aside some money in excess of that because we weren't sure how much it would actually cost when it was foreclosed. But the board was willing to provide some relocation assistance to that individual so that we could bridge the gap. So I have reserved in Parkview $15,000 for that purpose. Reserved it if you're in agreement with that. So that we can hopefully find him a place that he can afford. He's obviously looking for some way to supplement his income, and our long-term plan is to see if we can find him some type of housing arrangement where he's only paying 30% of the income. So, it's like a Sullivan McKinney or Parish Court. But that'll take some time.
He's in good health.
He's in decent health. He could work.
Okay.
So he said he's looking for employment to supplement his income.
60
So-
plus,
What's that?
60 plus.
He is over 60. Yeah, so I think that was the best solution we could provide. We do need to, obviously relocate him in order to move forward with the redevelopment plan. And so now we just have one tenant there who's on month to month. And, we're giving her plenty of time to find another place for her family, but it will take us some time before we're ready to actually move ahead with that. The plan currently for Parkview is to enter into a ground lease for all 5 lots, but then to focus on the 2 properties across the street that are conforming duplex lots that just need basically a building permit, and that'll be the next phase. And then the 3 lots that are contiguous, that will require some additional zoning approvals because that doesn't, what we have in mind doesn't conform with the current zoning. So that's the plan. I think I'd hope to get the ground lease to the Board of Selectmen this month. It looks like it's gonna be more December or January, but the way we're hopefully transitioning is we'll finish up Greenfield Street, 244 Greenfield Street. Come spring, they should be in a position to sell those April, May timeframe, and then they'll pivot they'll get their construction drawings in place, financing in line to then start construction immediately on those 2 lots on Parkview next year. And then we also have 254 Greenfield under contract. And the Board of Selectmen and Planning and Zoning have, as well as this body, have unanimously endorsed it. The way I structured it with Board of Selectmen is in the event that they choose not to fund it through ARPA, that the Housing Trust Fund would cover any difference. I didn't want to have to go back twice. So the RTM hopefully will approve it on the 25th. And we're good to go. So I think Steve always asks the Housing Trust Fund question. We're at the balance currently is $956,020. And if we take out, reserve the $15,000 for Parkview, that leaves an uncommitted balance of $941,020. The only expenses we had this past month were for to pay back taxes and sewer use charges and other utility costs associated with the properties we own. When we bought 273, there were back taxes. I argued that really the town, paying the town, but I was told I had to pay the back tax. So I tried to go back to get those waived, and I was told that I can't do that. So I did try.
Mark, isn't there another development happening at Sacred Heart or Fairfield U?
You mean residence halls or?
Yeah, something like
Yeah.
that. So we
Both.
could,
Yeah.
we should expect,
They're already in,
there, yeah.
unless there's a new one. that I'm not-
Well, Fairfield Prep is doing some work.
Yeah, Fairfield Prep and, but I think the one that's Fairfield U, they're just converting the Dolan's school.
Right.
Business school.
So I'm not sure
Okay.
that qualifies as a building addition or new construction, but
May not.
You gotta be
It's
creative.
gonna revert back to dorm.
dorm.
Yeah.
So there are no unbanked dollars from the
Yeah,
university?
I don't get a lot of, that's all handled and I just look at the numbers coming in and get back in. I did ask again, Bob's prior question on, I think Steve, you had also sent me something from West Hartford where they have a donate here button. And I asked, could we do that? If we had a housing trust fund and you have, you wanted to make a gift,
Mhm.
could we have a donate here button on our website?
Well, not just cash, could be appreciated stock, it could be.
Yeah.
It could be in kind, property, right?
So, and I'm working through whatever has to say yes to that. So I sent it to a bunch of people and I got one reply saying, I don't see why not, so I'll keep pushing it.
What did we start the year at?
We started the year at, well, if you want to look at uncommitted balances, we didn't, the uncommitted
Right.
balance was 616.
Yeah.
So, it works, it works out,
Yeah.
350.
it's about $350,000. And which is kind of what I think we had projected, maybe around 300. Did I miss anything?
The FCCHO, Technical Assistance
Would you
Grant.
like to provide any insight?
Sure, so we're working on two tracks here. One directly with the Housing Collective. We had a meeting yesterday, and our approach here had been, what can you do to help us develop a plan for middle housing? That was really our focus.
Yeah, what are we missing?
What are we missing? Yeah, what are we missing in missing middle? And so we've gotten a little bit maybe sidetracked toward the narrative, the message. How do we get the message out in terms of what we're trying to accomplish to the greater community, which is important. But Mark made a point yesterday in our meeting that we really want to spend, we want more of a focus to be on, the missing middle housing. What can we do to make this happen? We've been assured that there is work that's going on in the background to survey best practices in other communities. We're sort of waiting still for something there, but I think we made the point effectively yesterday that we want to do that. But I think there are some good things that could come out, some ideas we can get in terms of reaching out and building community support among people who can make a difference in terms of sending the message. And then we have a second track, which is a so-called cohort of towns that include Danbury, Richfield, and also Shelton, and us. And we're meeting with that group again tomorrow. And that has also been moving maybe a little bit more slowly than we had hoped. This cohort meeting has been meeting quarterly, so I guess it's the second meeting with them. And Mark and a couple of other towns are making presentations tomorrow housing trust fund and what's going with housing trust funds. And what else do we have with that agenda for tomorrow? I think there's some other things, but this is sort of the feature item.
Yeah.
So, I think when we learned what the other towns were, with all due respect to them, we figured we were probably further along than they were. And so I think we think it's really important for us to get whatever we can possibly get from the collective in terms of ideas directly from them. So we're happy to help these other towns work with them. We are a bit further along, so anything we can get from the collective. And I think anything we can do in terms of building kind of a consortium of towns that can maybe lobby for things in Hartford, that may be one positive outcome from this overall effort as well. So.
Yeah, the thing we talked about on the technical, the meeting we had Tuesday was really with the messaging was focused on how can we find more folks who would be willing to provide testimonial or support for housing initiatives. So my perspective, which I shared, we do a lot of marketing and promotion and, including for programs and services that we offer. And you just have to you broadcast a lot of stuff in different forums, but you have to have somebody that's receptive on the other end to receive that message and act on it. And if it's not really impacting you in a way, there's a lot of other things that are occupying your time. So we can create a beautiful brochure or video and talk about, all the people we help through affordable housing and things that we do. And it still may not move the needle very much, as opposed to, focusing our attention on the actual decision makers and making sure they have information on which they can make intelligent decisions. And also people that are really interested in the subject. So maybe it's really focused on finding people that are interested in the subject and helping provide them the tools that they can assist us in.
Right.
So
Right,
that's really-
and I know Jackie's got a particular interest in
Right.
this. And so I think if we can, they were talking about, identifying influencers and then working with gatekeepers, which could include churches and
Right.
associations. So I think that.
Gotta put the band back together.
Yeah, exactly. So I think I'm hopeful that maybe through, we got a long way to go, but I'm hoping that maybe through this Age-Friendly Fairfield initiative that we can find some people who can become influencers and really help us to tell the story. So
I did like the fact that Carla, at least spoke up at the public hearing for teaching, and was the only one in favor of the project and really spoke very, very well, very articulately about the need for affordable housing, allaying the concerns that, it's not the entire building, it's a percentage of the building.
Right.
Allay some of the condo owners' concerns. It was nice to see her do that.
Right.
I think the only other old business would be, since we last met, we had the ADU workshop.
Oh, yeah, I
yes,
forgot that.
yes.
And I think it was well attended, and pretty much the similar size group from the prior year, maybe.
I think about.
Very engaged, the participants were very engaged, I think. It went an hour and 15 minutes. We've got an excellent panel.
Yeah, very good panel.
I would put the Realtor on last, and not really. But other than that, she's a little talky, but a lot of good information, a lot of good interest, a lot of good questions. Everybody, I think the audience had a real keen interest in the topic, obviously, otherwise they wouldn't have been there. And they had some really good questions. So I don't think we think that maybe we offer this twice a year, do it in the spring and November. I don't know.
And if there's some way we can, we talked about ways we can, put something specifically on the website or maybe we can.
Well, the video's out. I mean,
Or do
Yeah,
something.
maybe we'll, the video is posted
Right.
and we did send that link out. It's on the news post. You can get to the link.
we sent the slides out, I think.
Slides are also linked. But, maybe, the way we film that, maybe it would lend itself to, doing some more targeted videos about specific
Yeah,
aspects
sort of,
of it. Sure, yeah.
One topic,
That we could put up there, like how to finance this and what does it mean in terms of
Yeah.
your
like a commercial.
value type thing. It could be like a
Spot.
90-second
Yeah.
thing that we could do with maybe the folks that we had.
Sure.
And, you know, maybe promoted through the first selectmen's newsletter
Right.
or some other way to, Bigelow newsletter, we can find ways to promote
Yeah,
it.
just sprinkle them here and there.
I did close the survey. We had 36 respondents. Most, all but one lived in town. All but two owned their own home. Of the 36 people that responded, more than half indicated that they knew little or nothing at all about accessory dwelling units, so that's our audience. And another 25% said they only knew a moderate amount. 70% indicated they would be interested in creating an ADU. So again, there's high interest. Most of the people, the two biggest motivations are flexibility so that I can age in place or provide housing for a family member. Those were the two biggest responses as to why. The concerns, the big concern was site constraints and cost, as well as regulatory barriers. Those are the three biggest concerns voiced. About half said they were either very likely or likely to create an ADU within the next 5 years. Again, high interest, and most people responded to the survey, not surprisingly, were over the age of 65, with a good chunk of folks right behind them in the 55 to 64 age cohort. So it was helpful in terms of the information. I think we're on the right track.
And your builder's already gotten 2 leads or 2 commitments. I'm not sure, their leads or commitments already from the seminar.
I'm good.
Wow.
You know, and going back to the POCD, I think this is the third area in addition to parking and inclusionary. There's not much in the draft on further liberalization of ADU.
The only thing we talked about, and the commission was willing to talk about, was whether or not to allow detached structures in
Everywhere.
smaller zones.
Yeah. There
Currently
may be
it's-
other things though that we want to propose, but they would be more along the lines of the Second Amendment, I guess.
And then the only other issue is cost is a major impediment here. You know, it doesn't, it cost he was saying what, $300 a square foot?
Right, yeah,
It's not an inexpensive project.
right.
So has anybody said ever that they wanted to do an ADU to provide affordable housing?
Well, I mean, no one's deed restricting their unit as affordable housing.
I'm just curious. I didn't expect them to. do
I don't
that.
expect it either unless you,
10 year, right?
yeah, I think the
Deed restriction.
well, you can do it for 10 years and see, this is the open question.
Right?
You know, I don't know why, so my reading of the statute, I don't know why they have a 10-year thing if it doesn't mean that it doesn't qualify for,
Right.
because otherwise, it could be a 1-year thing and I can put it in the inventory. Doesn't have to be 10 years, so why put 10 years in? So the state's interpretation of that is that no, it has to be 40-year restriction in order for it to count for a housing unit equivalency points. But the plain reading of the statute is somebody intended to put, you know, they put 10 years in there as a separate class, so I don't understand that, but we don't have a legal interpretation of that. I'm afraid to incentivize people on 10-year and not count towards housing unit equivalency points and sell it that way to town boards. So that's why we haven't done it, but I asked Trumbull, because Trumbull still has a program. And you may recall that they qualified for their first moratorium largely on the basis of accessory dwelling units. And I asked if they were 40-year restriction, they said, yeah. But the difference is that in Trumbull, they were not legal. And so they had a bunch of illegal ADUs and they had a general amnesty if you signed this deed restriction for 40 years. And everyone said, sure, we'll do that. And now they're only legal if you sign a 40-year deed restriction. So unfortunately, the horse has left the barn here in Fairfield. Got all of them legal. So I think to dial it back the other way would be problematic. I think
Trumbull has over 400 ADUs.
What's that?
Trumbull has over 400.
Yeah, they have a crazy number. They got a crazy number.
And many of them are still illegal?
No, they're all legal now. But, you know, from my standpoint here, so I don't know what's happening in Trumbull, in terms of their administration of this. But I'm curious as to whether or not these are administered as affordable units for 40 years. I find it hard to believe that a homeowner would enter into a 40-year restriction and honor that for a 40-year term. I mean, that's a long time.
Yeah, I mean, that can't be.
I find it hard to believe. I don't know.
Okay, I'll say
I find it hard to believe.
Unless there's escape language that would allow them to
But
opt
if
out.
they were escape language, the state would not count it.
There
So I have escape language in all mine, you know, when we do a multifamily rehab project, we do a declining balance loan. And we'll restrict it for a 40-year term, but you can opt out in your whatever. You just have to pay us back the balance that you borrowed. But the state would not count that as a 40-year restriction because it's not absolute.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We're having, you know, the state is asking us or telling us that they will not approve our moratorium application unless we have language in our application that says that we are enforcing and administering these units in accordance with the state regulations and statutes, which we are. So I have no problem certifying that. I just don't know if it doesn't say that in the regulations. When we talk to the person who reads the application, that's what he said. They reject a lot of applications if it doesn't include language to it. So be interested to see.
So the only other item that we have here, I think, is annual report. Is that referring to the reports of the RTM?
It is. I just put it on there because we do need to come up with an annual report. I don't know if we're okay with continuing with the current format. We do have to report on the balance in the housing trust fund and what the money's been used for. We did have that statistical thing, and then we just provide a summary of the things that we've worked on in the course of the year. If we're okay with that, I'll draft something for our
The
meeting.
$300,000 number we use is just becoming less and less real.
It is. To you sent that out, and there's no single-family homes. And that may be an issue, you know, long-term. The Housing Trust Fund, we've deployed it to purchase properties. And the properties we purchased have been either contiguous to town-owned property where we got a decent deal that we could actually create housing as a result of it. Or they were town properties to begin with, in the sense that there was a restriction in place for buying the Parkview Commons because we had a right of first refusal. You know, what properties are going for now, you know, we could spend the whole balance on one piece of property and I don't know what we do with it. So we may need to think about what our long-term strategy is with regard to the Housing Trust Fund. Because the way the housing costs are now, especially with trying to look at the missing middle piece, it's hard to justify that. $700,000 and $800,000 and to produce, you know, 3-4 units with that. So we have to think about what, you know, housing land cost was always an easy way because you take that off the equation for a developer, but we may have to think of other avenues. It's long term. And charter revision, anything else on that?
I don't think there's much to say.
I didn't see anything there, but.
I don't think there's really much that, first of all, there's very little of any substance related to boards in general. And I think there's only basically one paragraph that makes reference to the Affordable Housing Committee. And basically it's addressing the duties of the Director of Economic Development. Right. So I don't think there's really much for us to do, but certainly we can leave it on the agenda if anybody wants to suggest anything.
I wanted to make sure everyone here was aware that there's a charter revision effort underway.
We were asked to make sure that committee members were aware and didn't have any reactions or thoughts or suggestions. I don't think there's much. So, anyone have anything else for tonight?
Good of the party.
Yes, so next month, we'll have our speaker. As we discussed, I guess we'll have elections next
Yes,
month.
we need to set a meeting schedule.
Right, meeting schedule. And probably a good idea for us to sort of just look at the status of our goals and objectives. Certainly some of the things that we have on our list can and will be accomplished through the POCD acceptance if that happens early next year. But probably a good time for us to take a look at the targets and see where we are.
Essentially be at the kind of the midpoint of the plan, right?
Yeah.
What about membership? How are we looking?
Do we have, I don't know, you know your terms, does anyone?
So it'll be another year before we have any.
There's a couple.
Right.
And everybody is said that they wanna stay on.
Everyone want to stay on?
Didn't know that was an option.
Yeah.
I told you,
Stop
I
showing.
told somebody that you're on for life.
You have to put that in the charter. The return.
I know.
Okay.
I will have something probably on town-owned properties. Because I've taken it a step further from.
Listen, that's great because
Draft, there's still a fun on there, Mark.
Oh, I love it.
But I'll get it to you ahead of time, and if you think we should share it with.
that'd be great, Bob. Obviously, finding town-owned land would be a godsend because of the cost.
There are some courses. Yeah, there. That Giant Steps property.
Yeah.
Looking really. Why wouldn't Operation Hope look at that?
Well, for the clients that they serve,
I know they're on the other side of town. but-
and for, even the volunteers, it's not easy to get to. It's not on a bus line or anything like that. It's tucked away in the middle of a neighborhood, right? So I don't know
There's
that,
a building they could use.
well, that building is in very poor shape. They probably would have to tear that down or do a
Really
lot
that
of
bad?
it. It's in very bad shape. But it's a big piece of property.
Big piece of property.
I do, and there isn't really any plan for it, for the town.
You can connect.
Where is it? I'm trying to picture, I know I've driven by it, I reckon.
So it's off of
Middle Hill and Barbary,
Barberry.
the old seminary, John Vianney.
So half
Bought it
of the
in-
property is being used for the alternative high school program.
Right.
And that was the better building.
Yes.
The other building is basically blight falling down.
Yeah.
But
the town.
But it's a big- it's a
3
big-
years ago.
yeah, it's a
They
big
bought it.
piece of property.
It's like 16 acres. Yeah, and there are sewer connections there. Okay.
It's very large, the entrance is in a cul-de-sac surrounded by residential homes, so it's not exactly ideal. And then the town owns property on the other side, it's
On the other
open
side, yeah.
space.
Yeah, it's open space.
Oh.
Yeah.
So it's a big piece of property and the town has no long-term plans for it, really. So it's open for conversation at
Really
least. What do you envision there?
And we still think that Palmer's Neck property next to the Ruger.
I've checked into that before and I was told that is not viable as a development site for a lot of reasons. One is the fact that it's an open space and I think there are some restrictions on how it was acquired. And then secondly, a ledge that's visible. I mean, I know you can build projects on ledge, but it's expensive, so,
It's kind of small.
but I think it is small.
Only
I would anticipate at some point, the Ruger, Storm Ruger is basically the headquartered here, but they don't manufacture anything here. And they own, it's a pretty big piece of property as well, so I
Right.
wouldn't be shocked at some point that there would be plans for redeveloping that site at some point.
That's off the post road, right, back up.
That's off the.
That's it, like
Lazy
Southport,
Place,
off
Lazy Place, yep. And then across the street is Superior Plating, so. And, they'll go as long as the DEP will let them. I think that's it.
Okay, right. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor? Done. Okay, thanks everyone.
You were attacking my alligator.